Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to dive in.
This time we're heading to the Pacific Northwest, to the stunning shores of Lake Crescent in Washington state. It's the kind of place you see on postcards, you know? Sparkling blue water, surrounded by those lush, evergreen forests.
Picture perfect, really. The kind of place that just screams tranquility and escape.
Right. But a lot of places with that idyllic kind of beauty, Lake Crescent has a pretty dark secret, a mystery that went unsolved for almost what, 50 years?
Yep. 1952, the Peterson family, Arthur and Margaret, and their two kids, Lily, who was 10, and Sam, just 8 years old, they head out on a weekend trip to the lake, just a typical family getaway.
Fill up the car at a gas station, ready for some fun, and then poof.
Vanished. No trace. Just gone.
It's like something out of a mystery novel, you know? And it makes you wonder, what happens when a place, especially a place known for its beauty and peacefulness, becomes the scene of something so unsettling? How does that impact a community?
Well, I think, especially when you're talking about a small, tight-knit community like the one around Lake Crescent, that kind of disappearance has a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the place that felt safe, familiar, it takes on a whole new feeling.
There's that unease, right? That feeling that maybe things aren't what they seem.
Exactly. And, when there are no answers, no explanations, well, that's when the rumors start, the speculation.
Oh, for sure. People try to fill in the blanks. They try to make sense of the senseless.
And that's how legends are born. Lake Crescent already had its share of, local lore, ghost stories and the like, but the Peterson family vanishing, that just amplified it all.
It's like it fed the mystery, blurred the lines between what was real and what was just a story. Did the investigators, did they have any leads early on? Anything at all?
They really threw everything they had at it. Massive search parties combing the area, divers searching the lake, but got nothing. It was like the Petersons just vanished into thin air.
So imagine, for nearly 50 years, this case just sits there, cold, unsolved, no answers for the family, no peace for the community.
And then something incredible happens. 2001, a severe drought hits the region. The water level of Lake Crescent drops dramatically, way lower than anyone had seen before.
Wait, so are you telling me?
You got it. What's revealed in those shallows? A rusted car.
No way.
And inside, skeletal remains, a family, the Petersons, finally found after all those years, hidden beneath the surface of the lake.
Talk about a twist of fate. The drought, of all things, unearthing a secret that had been submerged for decades. Gives me chills just thinking about it.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes nature plays a role in revealing the truth, even when human efforts fail. But this discovery wasn't just about closure. It was a chance to revisit the case with fresh eyes.
Because in the, almost 50 years since the Petersons disappeared, forensic science had, exploded, right?
Completely transformed. DNA analysis, advanced techniques for examining trace evidence, things that weren't even imaginable back in the 50s. It was like a whole new set of tools to unlock the secrets of the past.
So they had the car, they had the remains. What did the new forensic analysis reveal?
They examined Arthur Peterson's skull and found a fracture, a detail that could have been missed during the initial investigation. But now, with the advanced technology, it was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a tragic accident. This was a possible homicide.
Okay, hold on. So now we're talking murder. But who? Who would want to harm the Petersons? Was there anyone suspicious back then?
There was one individual who stood out, someone who had been questioned during the original investigation, but dismissed as, harmless, or at least not a serious threat. Richard Hull. He was a coworker of Margaret Peterson's.
What was his connection to the family? Was he just like a casual acquaintance?
He had developed, let's say, a bit of an obsession with Margaret. Sent her some letters, maybe lingered a little too long around her at office events. But at the time, it didn't seem like anything to be overly concerned about.
So this Hall guy, he was just a little creepy, but not necessarily a murderer, right?
And that was the assumption at the time. But with its new focus on the possibility of foul play, investigators decided to take a closer look at Hall's background. And what they found painted a much darker picture.
Okay, so tell me, what did they uncover?
Well, for starters, the letters weren't just friendly notes. They were, let's just say they were more along the lines of, obsessive love letters. And witnesses started recalling Hall making inappropriate comments about Margaret, talking about her in a way that suggested a deep infatuation, bordering on, delusion.
So his obsession was more than just a little crush.
It went much deeper than that. And there was more. Hall had a prior criminal record. charges related to assault and harassment. Information that was, well, initially dismissed as unrelated to the Peterson case. But now, it took on a whole new significance.
So suddenly, this seemingly harmless coworker was starting to look like a pretty strong suspect. But did investigators have anything concrete linking him to the Petersons' disappearance? Anything that put him at the scene of the crime?
Remember how the car was found? Damaged like it had been run off the road? Well, investigators took another look at those dents and scrapes, and they discovered something crucial: microscopic traces of paint. And guess what? That paint matched the exact make and model of car that Richard Hall owned at the time the Petersons disappeared.
Wow, that's pretty damning evidence. But where was Hall all this time? Did they manage to track him down after all these years?
Remember how he disappeared shortly after the Petersons vanished? Well, it turns out he'd been living under an assumed name in a remote town miles away from Lake Crescent. He was trying to build a new life, trying to escape his past.
But the past has a way of catching up with you, doesn't it?
It certainly does. They caught up with him all right, brought him back to Washington to face charges in the deaths of the Peterson family.
Wow. I mean, after all that time, can you imagine what must have been going through his head to suddenly be confronted with this, with his past?
It's hard to say, but throughout the whole trial, he maintained his innocence.
He did.
Yep, claimed he had nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
But the evidence, pretty overwhelming.
So what happened? What was the verdict?
Well, it took the jury just a few days to reach a decision.
Hmm.
Guilty on all 4 counts of murder.
Wow. So after, what, over 50 years, the Peterson family finally got some semblance of justice.
It was a landmark case, really. Not just for the length of time that had passed, but also because it really showcased the power of modern forensic science.
Right. Like without those advances in technology, those tiny traces of paint, that skull fracture, they might have been overlooked. Hall might have gotten away with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It showed how crucial it is to preserve evidence, even in cases that seem like dead ends. You never know what might become important later on as technology evolves.
It's almost like a second chance at justice, you know? Using these new tools to re-examine the past, to right the wrongs that might have been forgotten.
It's a powerful thing, but there's also a bittersweet element to it, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yes, Hall was convicted, but it came so long after the Petersons were taken. And you have to wonder, what about those missing years, the time that the family lost, the pain they endured? Can a conviction really make up for that?
It's a tough question. And to make things even more tragic, Hall died in prison just a year after the trial.
Oh, wow. So he took any secrets he had about what really happened that day at the lake, any possibility of a confession, he took that to the grave with him.
He did. And that leaves a lot of unanswered questions.
Mm.
What really happened to the Petersons on that fateful trip? What were their final moments like?
It's a heartbreaking thought, and it just underscores the ripple effect of a crime like this. It's not just the victims, it's their families. It's the entire community that's left to grapple with the trauma, the uncertainty, the what-ifs.
And for almost 50 years, Lake Crescent was shrouded in this mystery. It became a place associated with tragedy, with loss. Imagine living in that community knowing that this unsolved case, this chilling event, was part of your history.
It's almost like a dark cloud hanging over the place, tainting its beauty.
Yeah. And even though there was a conviction, even though justice was served, in a way, it couldn't erase those years of fear, of speculation. It couldn't bring back the Petersons.
No, it couldn't. But maybe in a way it offered some closure, a chance for the community to heal, to reclaim their sense of peace.
Perhaps, but it also raises some really complex questions about how we deal with cold cases, about the ethics of digging up the past, of potentially disrupting lives, even if it means bringing a killer to justice.
Yeah. It's a tricky thing, isn't it? Where do you draw the line?
Exactly. On one hand, you have the victims, their families who deserve justice. On the other hand, you have to consider the potential harm, the emotional toll that reopening old wounds can have. It's a delicate balance.
And there are no easy answers. But the Peterson case, it really highlights just how much forensic science has changed the game, how it's given us new ways to seek justice, to hold people accountable for their actions, even after decades have passed.
It's true. And, it makes you wonder how many other cold cases are out there, cases that were once considered unsolvable, but maybe, just maybe, with the right tools, with the right technology, they could be cracked open.
It's a glimmer of hope, isn't it, for families who've been waiting sometimes for decades, for answers.
It is. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, even when all hope seems lost, the truth, it has a way of emerging. Sometimes it just takes a little longer than we expect.
And it takes people who never give up. Investigators who are dedicated to finding answers, to seeking justice, no matter how much time has passed. So what do you say? Ready to wrap things up?
It does. And you know what else strikes me about this whole case? It's how those little details, those things that might have seemed insignificant at the time, like a scuff mark on a car, a witness placing someone near the lake, they ended up being so crucial in the end.
It's like a puzzle, right? You need all those little pieces to see the whole picture.
Exactly. And it just shows how important it is for investigators to, document everything, preserve every bit of evidence, even if it doesn't seem relevant at the time.
Yeah.
Because you just never know what might be, important down the line.
Especially as technology advances, right? Like what might have been impossible to analyze back then could be, routine now. Makes you wonder about all the other cold cases out there sitting unsolved. Maybe some of them could be cracked open if we just had like a new way to look at the evidence.
It's a fascinating possibility. And with more and more law enforcement agencies investing in cold case units, using all the latest tech, DNA analysis, digital forensics, who knows? Maybe we'll start seeing more of those long forgotten cases finally get solved.
It's a glimmer of hope for those families, the ones who've been waiting for answers, sometimes for decades, to finally know what happened to their loved ones.
It is. And, going back to Lake Crescent, we talked about how the Peterson case really cast a shadow over that whole area for all those years.
Yeah, it's like it became part of the landscape almost, a sense of unease that lingered even after the initial investigation wrapped up.
And that just highlights how deeply crime can impact a community, the ripple effects that spread out, touching everyone, not just the immediate victims. It can be hard to shake that feeling of unease, of knowing that something terrible happened in a place you thought was safe.
So in a way, maybe Hall's conviction, even though it came so long after the fact, maybe it was a step towards healing for that community, a way to finally reclaim some of that peace that was lost.
Maybe. But it also brings up those ethical questions we were talking about.
Hmm.
Like, is it always right to reopen these old wounds, even if it means bringing a perpetrator to justice?
It's a tough one because on one hand, you have the victims, their families who deserve to know what happened, who deserve justice. But then there's the potential harm of, dredging up the past, potentially disrupting lives, causing more pain. It's a tricky balance.
There's no easy answer. Each case has its own unique set of circumstances, and you have to weigh those factors carefully.
But in the Peterson case, at least, I think it's safe to say that revisiting the past was the right thing to do.
I'd agree with that. It brought closure to a mystery that had haunted so many people for so long, and it showed that even after decades, justice is still possible.
Exactly. And that's really the takeaway here, isn't it? That the pursuit of truth, it's a journey. Sometimes it's long, sometimes it's winding, sometimes it takes unexpected turns. But it's a journey worth taking.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about persistence, about never giving up hope, about believing that even the most deeply buried secrets can eventually be brought to light.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to bring this deep dive to a close. We've covered a lot of ground today. From the shock of the Peterson family's disappearance to the chilling discovery of their car decades later to the bittersweet victory of a conviction more than 50 years after the crime. It's a story that reminds us that even in the most beautiful and peaceful places, darkness can lurk. But it also reminds us of the power of persistence, of the importance of seeking justice, and of the incredible advances in forensic science that are helping us solve mysteries that were once thought to be unsolvable. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the vanishing family of Lake Crescent, and we'll see you next time for another exploration of the mysteries that captivate and intrigue us all.